All right, good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining us for Revit Radio. I guess it could be good morning, depending on where you are, or good evening. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining us for Revit Radio. I do see a couple new names on here. So just for you guys don't know, I'm Brian. This, or this, depending on how you're looking, is Melissa.
Hey.
Revit Radio is webcast. It's kind of like Car Talk. If you've ever listened to Car Talk, which is now outdated, way back when I started Revit Radio, that's what we based it on, was Car Talk. So it's a place where you ask questions, we give you answers. They may or may not be politically correct. So historically, I've never recorded this, but this year I've had too many people ask me to start recording it, so we did. So, but the whole thing is you have to ask questions, and that is why there is the Q&A pod you have. And then we have the chat box where you guys can just chat, tell me I'm crazy when I give an answer, do anything you want. But do try to keep the questions in the Q&A pod, because when people are all chatting, it's a little hard to try to track down and keep a hold of where the questions might be. So with that said, we're going to try to buy a little bit of time. We're waiting for you guys to type questions in. I do want to say that it is March, which means we should start seeing Autodesk software get released, anytime. Historically, mid-March is when they start releasing all the AutoCAD-based products. And then usually beginning of April, historically, it's been about April 5th, which for those who don't know, that is Revit's birthday. Revit originally came out on April 5th. The only reason I know that it's also one of my daughter's birthdays. So, but yeah, April 5th. So think about that, man. 2024 is going to be coming out anytime soon. So I don't know if you guys did know about this. Well, I don't even know if I thought I had it pulled up, but it doesn't look like I do. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Revit, I was trying to find the Revit, what is it? What is the link? What is it? I was looking for the Revit. No. Well, I can't find the link. I had it just the other day too. Thought I had it open. Yeah, the Revit Roadmap. I was trying to find the Revit Roadmap. A link for it. There we go. Is this it? Is this the new one? No, it's this. That's the 22. Yeah, that's an old one. They updated to a new public roadmap. Yeah, I think it's called the public roadmap now. Let me see. No, that is still
the name.
Yeah, it's now the public roadmap. All right, so here is the Revit public roadmap. I will put this in there. So usually if you start looking at the public roadmap here, for those of you who are not on the beta forums or anything like that, that this is the Revit architecture. This is what they're saying are up in progress. It usually, not always, but usually what you see on the in progress is the stuff that will be out in the next release. Doesn't necessarily, it's definitely going to make it, but usually this is what's going to be coming out inside of there. And what I've seen on here that looks really cool to me that I liked a lot is the link coordination models from Autodesk. What I love about this is if you're on the cloud, you can now do coordination models. And for those of you who don't know, coordination models historically have only been NWC files. So we've been able to bring in NWC files into Revit for a while, but they didn't show up. And obviously I don't know this is not out yet, but they didn't show up in like renderings or anything. But it was nice to be able to bring those NWCs in. What they've done to the coordination models is we no longer are limited to NWCs. It's anything that the Autodesk Docs platform can hold. So that now introduces 60 versions, 60 different file versions. And the one thing that I had heard rumors on that'd be really, really cool is you could bring in a different version of a Revit file into your file, right? So I can just upload without collaborating. I can upload any sort of Revit file up there. It could be a Revit 8 version versus a Revit 23 or 24 version, upload it to there, and then be able to link that into my file. Where this might be great to have is if you do upgrade like a Revit project. So I can upgrade it from 22 to 23, put the old 22 on, or 23 to 24, and still be able to then link that in and start seeing any differences. So feel free, I did put this into the chat, but do feel free to hop in here and see what's going on. And again, like I said, historically, beginning of April means we'll start to get the new Revit downloads. I did check today. There are no AutoCAD downloads. So I did go into my manage.autodesk.com, and we're still all in 23 versions. But I can't imagine that we're not going to be seeing the AutoCAD stuff here shortly. So just something to go in and look at what you have inside of here. If you guys have a chance to start going through and checking it out. So anything you had to add, Melissa, that you can think of?
Not really. Just
Oh, yes, Michael's a good point. That last week, Autodesk did release on your manage.autodesk the license managers, not just like the Flex LM stuff, but licensing files for all of your things. And I do know that there has been a bug in the past where if you were a named user, you could log in on one machine, and then it gave you like a 24-hour grace period. So technically you could log in on another machine if you logged in at the same time twice. The big note on that license manager upgrade that Michael's talking about is it flat out said, yeah, you're going to get a warning that they need to log you out of the other machine. So I'm not saying I have any clients that do this, but I have heard of people that have been using that to take advantage of, oh, look, if I log in over here, then I can log in on this other machine. So they're actually using two different people to do it. I don't know. I think it's crazy amount of time and effort people put in to save money. Sometimes it costs more money. But if you are doing that, yeah, the license manager is updated and it is affecting on that thing. It also said it affects Civil 3D, InfraWorks, Revit, and AutoCAD based products, I think. So who knows? All right, I see a few questions. Hopefully, some of these questions will take some time while we're waiting for other questions. So what do we got on the agenda first, Melissa?
Let's see. Let's start with Rick's. Rick is asking, it's probably more of a question to the group, but from your experience, what percentage of firms have moved primarily to 2023? Do they upgrade every year or skip years?
I don't know. You deal with a lot of clients like I do, Melissa. So what have you been noticing?
Most of our clients do upgrade every year, but recently 2 of our clients have told us they skip even years. So they're still in 21 and they will be moving up to 23.
24 is out or will be in a month.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had one client come in here saying, oh, so we're thinking about upgrading to 23. This was like literally 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, no, wait a month and upgrade to 24 if you're going to do it. Why are you going to upgrade to a product literally a year before or a year after it's been out? So I don't know. For me, most of my clients, they upgrade within reason, but they don't like wait. There's no rule. I'm going to wait for the first service pack. And most of my clients, they rely on me to say, hey, yeah, I haven't seen any massive glitches, haven't heard any, and most of them upgrade quite relatively soon. But I also have a lot of like structural engineer clients or interior design clients who also have to just rely on the architect or the powers that be in the project. And so for them, they are waiting around. And that is actually a great question to think about because theoretically, per the license agreement, when 24 comes out, you can no longer use 20. Right? Because if you are a named seat or you are on subscription maintenance, whatever the hell it's technically called now, you get to use the current version plus 3. So if 24 comes out, we can use 23, 22, and 21. Theoretically, 21 is not going to be supported anymore. Michael, I looked everywhere because I thought it was going to be previous plus 4. Is what it had said. And everything I looked at that I was looking at, it currently says previous plus 3. Now in 2019, it said current plus 4, but I couldn't find anything on the Autodesk site because I had a client asking me this, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know because this is one client where they're working with architects that with 3 projects are on Revit 20. I'm like, I don't know. Technically, when I went to look at the end user license, it technically says that you can only go back plus 3. Now, with that said, if you're like on network licenses, it's easy to get exceptions to that rule. Network licensing, you can usually call Autodesk. It's a pain in the ass, but they'll be like, oh yeah, here's a new network license file that will let you go back. But from what I looked at when I was in there and I sent it off to one of my clients, it literally was only, no, here you go. You have to use this plus 3. And I did send that to a client. So I'm going to find that link here real quick. Control C, and I'll open this back up and go up here and put it here. So this is what I found, and this is like where is it? Current version also the subject on a previous version rights. These rights allow you to access the most recent version, but you can also exceed the number of current license at any given time. This is not. Is this it? I thought it's sitting here somewhere. Oh yeah, here you go. Somewhere in here it says, oh, 5 years back in most cases. So there you go. Now it says 5 years. The link I sent the other day had a 3. So this is a different link that I sent, which I didn't read. The first one I found said 3 versions. So So there you go. I'm lying. You'll be able to go back 5 cases. I don't know. Personally, I still tell my clients 3 because I don't want people to be like, oh, I'm still using Revit 18. I don't want to upgrade this. So to me, I don't understand, unless you're on a very large project that's failing miserably when you try to upgrade that project, why people don't upgrade. I don't understand the hesitation to be like, oh no, I'm going to stick in this project. You know, once I started, I'm going to stick in that project forever. It's just kind of like, I don't know. If it's a 6-month project, cool. Yeah, I understand not upgrading to the latest release if it's a 6-month long project. But come on, no projects are ever 6 months long. My dang landscape project took 1.5 years. So
Yeah, I remember like way back in the day, like 06, 07, we had a couple issues, but it was usually the mechanical models that had problems upgrading. But there's still people in my old firm that just still held on to that and are like, no, we can't upgrade. It's just like,
yeah.
but you're missing all these things.
Yeah, exactly. I have one client, they're always asking me, well, can we do this? I'm like, yeah, if you upgrade. It's one client, one of those clients that just refused to upgrade a project. Oh, great. Oh, we're finally like, screw it, we're gonna upgrade to 23 because you keep telling us this. It's like, yeah, you're asking for features that have been out for 2 years. So there you go. Yeah, I'll have to. Oh, it's for updates. Yeah, I have to go back and look at the licensing agreement too. I'll go back and I'll post that link into the chat. Maybe somebody else can post a different one if they find it. But that's the one that I just had open in the chat. So yeah, I don't know. To me, I mean, I laugh because I still have to go back to one client and they're still doing some of their template work in Revit 20, and I go back and work on their stuff and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had this feature. Oh my God, I wish I had this feature.
Yeah, I'm still in 22 mostly for template things. And today I got to upgrade one to 23 and it was just like, oh, all these small little usability, like, yeah, it
Yeah, I
made
was
me
with a
sad.
client.
I'll be sad when I go back to 22.
I was literally with a client, and I don't even remember what it was, but we were duplicating schedules and putting filters in based on the level or something like that. And I'm like, and had you just been in 23, it just would have been a little check of this, include elements and views, and you'd be done. One schedule, every sheet, it's showing you what we're spending hours upon hours of doing right now. One checkbox in that schedule would have been done. Yeah, and I agree with that too, Simon, of your add-ons. And that's one thing that I'm a proponent on that Simon typed in there is, you know, some people rely on their add-on utilities. I have a rule of thumb, and I know I use Ideate tools a lot, and I gave them hell last year that it took them like 3 or 4 months to get up to the 23 version. And I'm kind of like, guys, I'll stop recommending you if it takes you too long to upgrade your product, because all of the developers get access to the software 3 months early. So they get the beta builds, they get the pre-release builds, and they can be testing their stuff with these builds to see if it's working. So when it comes out and somebody takes like 3 months or 6 months to upgrade an add-on utility, that is not an add-on utility I will ever use or recommend. If you can't get it out within the first 4 or 5 weeks, I don't want to rely on my productivity because of some new feature I want based on your lack of ability to upgrade. So for me, yeah, if I'm using a tool and historically year after year they do that, I find another tool. That's a big thing for me when I'm evaluating add-on utilities. Hence why I still use journal files to like upgrade stuff, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to upgrade this right now to the new 23 version. Oh, wait, your upgrade add-on utility hasn't been updated yet? Well, hell, I don't want to wait. And so that's why I still use journal files to do that, because there's no hesitation, no wait on that. Journal files will always work. So yeah, so I don't know. That's the question. So yeah, 23 is out. Most of my clients are on 23, unless it's some lingering long project. But in any one of my clients, if they're the lead and they're starting a new project, they've all been on 23 for at least 6 months. Cool. So what's our next question there?
Next question. It looks like we've got some family ones coming in. So we'll start with Jason. So overall, this is a content naming question. What are the pros and cons of using a prefix or a suffix in the naming?
I personally think using a prefix or a suffix is a horrible idea, as long as you have a naming convention. And what I mean by that is I get people who, you know, one of the big things is everybody wants to go in and put their company acronym at the end or at the beginning or something like that. I have a naming convention. If it's a tag, it says tag underscore. If it's a symbol, it says sim underscore. I have a specific way I name things. Me then throwing my acronym at the end of this name, all it does is increase space, file size, I don't get it. If you have a specific naming convention, why do you then need to throw your name on there? Nobody wants to come up in here and fill out, oh, gee, if it doesn't match this, it's not mine. Nobody else does it like this. So they come up with some similar thing. And I know Parallax is very similar to me with like a lot of their regular content. Like when I go into my doors have a specific naming convention, right? So if I go into my openings and I look at my openings, right, it's DR for door underscore. If it's the frame, it's an F. If it's a leaf, it's an L, et cetera, et cetera. If it's a generic model, it's GM. Why do I need to complicate things with different things? I highly doubt I'm going to find somebody else using the exact same naming convention. And I know for Parallax, you guys then put like WB, FB at the end of your families to know if it's wall-based, floor-based, freestanding, whatever. So now where do I throw an acronym in there? Is it beginning, the end? And at the beginning, I think is stupid. Because if it's at the beginning, now I have to search through all of those letters first. And I can't go down to like, oh, I know when I'm searching in my project browser, I need to go to Leafs. I can be at the top, hit an L, and it'll take me there. But if I've got my company acronyms first, I can't just type the letter to get me down there because now every single one of them starts with my company letter. So plus, I mean, come on, my company acronym is BM, and that's just shit. So nobody wants that as a prefix anywhere. Sorry, that's a little medical joke there.
So we also, ours is very similar to yours, but we do add the 2 numbers for the division. So like 08 openings or, 08 door dash, whatever, or 0 zeros for a lot of the annotation. And that's mostly to keep them all in similar chunks in the project browser. But yeah, we don't tend to
the only reason I don't do that is so like when I get to balusters, do I duplicate the baluster based on material? Because if it's a round baluster, it could be wood, it could be concrete, it could be steel, it could be anything, any of the above. So now do I have to duplicate that baluster family? Because the baluster can be different divisions. Because if it's a baluster that's concrete, that's different than a baluster that's wood, and that's different than that's a baluster. So that's part of my problem with CSI in the Revit world. I absolutely do this for my detail components. My detail components, I absolutely did that because in Revit, they're all in one location in Revit. So yeah, I come down here and I use the first 3 characters because the first 3 character puts all transitions together, all ceiling stuff together, all gypsum board together. So my detail components, I 100% thought that was a great idea. And again, part of that is because when you're in the project browser in Revit, you need to search through one folder. And yeah, I get 600 detail items in a project that really becomes a pain in the ass to see all of those in there.
Yes, I was just looking through ours. We actually have it as 05 and 06 profiles. So therefore, if it is metal or.
Yeah, but again, if it's a round profile, is that just a 00 because it could be anything? Do you have a 05?
That's so their profiles are. It would be 00 through whatever profile and then whatever it is. So we have 05, 06 balusters. And then the profiles have their own folder.
Yeah, but
there's never right way.
What Melissa and I are 100% agreeing on is company initials is stupid. And I saw somebody said is in there is don't you put your names on it so the linked architect share files, they know it's yours. Again, does the architect have my exact same naming convention? No. Like I have a lot of clients, and I know this for those of you who haven't been in Revit for a while, this was one of the big things. I don't know. Somebody came out with a great idea and released a paper. God, it was probably back in like 2008 or 9. They released a paper on best practices for Revit, and one of them was put your company initials on everything so you know they're yours. Another one was add hashtags or asterisks, so like to all the line styles. So I know I go into some of my clients who've been using Revit for like 20 years, and you go into like their line styles, and every single one of the line styles or their fill patterns or whatever, they come in and they have an asterisk in front of it. So you expand lines, and it's like asterisk dash, asterisk hidden, and it's like what? Asterisk contours, and it's like why? Well, then all my stuff shows up at the top. I'm like, oh my God, I don't get that. Who cares if it's your line style? But go for it. I also don't understand why you decided that you have to use an asterisk or hashtag for your stuff in line styles, but then use your company name for your stuff in the family name. So I don't know. For me, no, I don't I don't agree with prefix or suffix in the namings unless you're going to be do something like Melissa said, hey, we say face-based, wall hosted, ceiling hosted, whatever, we add that to the end. And I do know on some of my older profile families, I used to do the same thing. Most of my profile families now, I've got it put in there. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't have them in here, but if I come into this one, I put an acronym at the end because I actually have a parameter to shift it, because in profiles, it's all about the insertion point. So for me, my profiles had TL for top left, TR for top right, you know, MC for middle center, whatever it would have been. But now I've upgraded almost all of my profiles now to actually come in here and just have the parameter to shift that insertion point on the profile. And then somebody said they do PROF for profile families. I do PFL for profiles. I also try to keep it fairly minimalistic. Like I know somebody who basically spell it all out and it's just like, oh no, I want to be as minimal characters as I can, because more and more as we start storing this stuff up in the cloud, you know, you start getting these long things in there. You also see that a lot of my stuff doesn't use spaces, because if I download something from the cloud, then I get %20 anywhere there's a space. It's actually because I'm an old school guy who used to do DOS space writing, and in DOS space days, you couldn't have spaces, and I'm still on that mentality from 30 years ago. So, but yeah, agree. I think everyone here, Jason, is saying no, company acronym is stupid. I shouldn't say stupid. I should be more politically correct, and I should say unneeded, as long as you have a great naming structure.
Yeah, because really the biggest point is making it easy for people to find and kind of keeping it consistent. That's the biggest thing.
Well, and I think the big thing for me is the two that are most important in my brain are annotation elements and detail items, because when you're searching through the project browser, I want symbols all together. I want tags all together. I want like datum type elements all together. I don't like having them mixed all over the place. Again, also even then with your detail items. And I know people like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I have them on my server organized a specific way, etc. Cool, but when you get those two categories, those and profiles, when you get those categories run inside of Revit, they're all under a single folder. You've got to come up with some sort of naming convention on those. Type then description. Yeah, if that's personally, I'd be using an underscore, not a space dash space. The other reason I like space dash space, dashes inside of those things, I want clients who do like dashes or parentheses, etc., is always think about if you're doing a family type drop down and you want to do a drop down for that, then you see the dash in there. Revit thinks that's a sum, a formula. Oh, now you're saying receptacle minus duplex. That's an invalid formula. And you're like, no. So that's the other reason for me why I've never used special characters or dashes in any of my family names or anything, is because of that. Like I have one client, these parentheses in their family names are their type names, I should say. And I just think that's a horrible idea. You can get around it. You can use quotes. You can do all the brackets, etc. I just avoid it. I don't. That's my opinion. Again, all of these are my opinion. You can feel free in the chat to tell me I'm stupid. I don't care.
Nice. Oh, and hopefully I muted fast enough. Apparently the mailman came and so the dogs went a little late. Good times. Okay.
See, I'm not the only one. Michael's as old as I am, remembering all the fun DOS ASCII symbols. All right, so what's our other question? I haven't had to do anything in Revit yet. These have all just been, hey, good opinion questions.
Okay, should we get you in there? So, well, we'll start early with Chris's. Is there an easy way to have a single baluster centered in a railing?
See, and I almost opened my sample railings file. What do you mean by single baluster? Ryan? No, that wasn't Ryan. That was Chris. And that's a follow-up question to buy me time while I'm opening up my railings file. Because the balusters in a family are always going to be just based upon all the settings you have inside of there. So if you're looking at like this one here, when I go into there to look at the baluster placement, you've got the offset, which is going to shift that. inside or out of the family. So if I go change this to be like 4 inches, not 4 feet, and hit OK, because apply there does nothing apply, you can see that that's now going to adjust those balusters out of there. If you meant centered, I want one in the middle of this period, and I don't need these space every 4 inches. Then what I could also do inside of here is just do some sort of ridiculous spacing. So if I go back in here to the baluster placement, I literally only wanted one. I could do, hey, my distance from previous is inner, but is like 200. But then my offset down here would also be 200, not 2000. And that should then give me one, if I'm doing this correctly, that should then give me one, maybe I got to do it 100 or 100. I always got to remember which setting that is. Come on, edit type. Go to my baluster placement. It's down here, justify center, excessive fill length, none. Okay, it's got to be a 0. Come on. Maybe this is 0. And this is the 200. Usually it's half and half. I hate that apply doesn't do anything and it gets me every time. What it would what did Chris follow up with? The pattern is horizontal members, but I want one divider in the middle without doing corner baluster condition. Yeah, this should work. I've done this before.
Yes, the good old should work in railings. I think we've all been there. Often.
Well, when you want it centered, that's what this distance from previous is on the third option. So if I were to come in here and say, hey, let's just do 2 feet here and 0 here, then you'll see that that one is not centered on the back. That one is centered here. Or that's actually spread pattern to fit too. So when you're doing a pattern of them with like 2 or 3 or 4, it's like, is that pattern starting here or you want the middle of it centered? So if I have like a pattern or a panel, that's what you then have this offset here for. So if you have this offset here, this is going to shift this whole pattern over. So if I needed like a 4 foot wide, then I can change this down here to shift that pattern. You also have the justify down here for the pattern. Like, hey, I want this pattern to start centered or the beginning. And this is basically, if you're doing more than one, how are you justifying that more than one's pattern? If you're like, hey, I'm just doing something simple like this, I can say the center, the beginning, the end, or the spread pattern to fit. I'm not a big fan of spread pattern to fit because usually when we're doing a handrail, we're trying to say, I have this fixed spacing. This would be the current option that you would be talking about of, hey, I just need one in the middle. And if I were to, I don't know what the max spacing this is. I've never tried doing it at 100. Let's just go say like 50 feet. Okay, and hit apply. Yeah, see, it's like, it's freaking out if you get too big, which doesn't surprise me in Revit. 25.
So I'm noticing you're like me and I don't use the preview a lot because I always forget that it's there in railings.
This preview isn't going to work for you on something like this, I don't think. So you can see, like, I don't know. Get here and say 6. What I hate is this apply literally only applies to the preview. And notice when I'm changing the distance from previous, all it's doing is changing the length of the handrail, which doesn't do anything to actual spacing. Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And then if I hit the apply there, it doesn't do it back there. I actually have to hit the apply in here to see if that's going to happen.
It's all of them. I have to say,
so
Simon's saying he uses spread to fit and then splits the sketch line, and I have definitely ended up doing that a few times.
But the question specifically said without using the corner split tool, so I'm trying to.
That's fair.
See, I use the stupid other apply all the time. So I guess 10 feet is the max spacing it's going to let me do. Oh, it could be based on the length of the handrail too, because handrail is probably drawn 20 feet long. So this handrail here is probably drawn 20 feet long. So that's probably why 10 feet is going to be my maximum on this. And again, all those frustrations that we all love to see in Revit, you know, that like, oh, why isn't it working for this handrail, but it works for that one. And then there you go. If I go say here, I go to my baluster placement and I did say centered. This is what I was talking about. You're like, that's centered, but I wanted the baluster centered. So this is where if you come in here and say 5 feet there, and notice my pattern is set to be center. and I change this to be 5 feet and 5 feet, and again, hit the wrong apply button, which does nothing, then now here's where I can get that one to be centered. So, and I do know where Chris is coming out on this. Like there's been times where I've had these like handrails, like I have a client who does a lot of airports, and it's usually just the rail that's going around the concessions area. So it's not really dividing people from it. They just want a rail like, oh, however long this is, I need one center of support on that. That's kind of what it is. But again, if I were to then probably copy this rail over and draw it shorter, I bet you the path of this is 20 feet, which is why the 10, oh, it's 16 feet. But and if I were to go make this like 8 feet and finish it, I'm probably not going to get that baluster in the middle. So the funness of Revit is this is where you come in and start saying, okay, balusters suck, right? We all know this in Revit. We all can deal with it. This one up here, you'll notice that if I can tab select to get my baluster, right? This isn't technically a baluster in this handrail. So if I look at this handrail, I'm going to go remove all the balusters and say I don't want any. I'm going to come up here and say none. My corner posts all say none and say okay. So now what I've done here is these are not balusters, corner posts, etc. What this is going to be is a support that's coming off of this top rail. So if I want to edit this, I can go edit this top rail, and this top rail is going to say, hey, I'm using supports. Da, 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 da. Where are my supports? Top terminations, no. Extension, maybe it's not that top rail. Which one is it? It's one of these top rails. There's probably a top rail bid. Yeah, there's a top rail hidden in there. So let me take this one and hide it. It's this one that I have hidden here. Let me edit this top rail. And this top rail in here is actually using supports, and the maximum spacing is 4 feet. Let's go try and say 10. Let's say okay. And so now you can see I'm getting that same scenario. But what I like about this is oops, I didn't mean to copy it. I meant to just move it. What's nice about this is since it's a support, I can tab select that, unpin it, and put it wherever the heck I want it to be. So for me, when I'm talking railings, and especially for what I'm inferring you're going for, Chris, and what you're trying to do is I don't actually do this as balusters. To me, this is going to be a support that's on one of my railings. Right, Autodesk came out with this a long time ago, and this is what most of us think of as supports, is a little support to support the handrail. But we can actually, in those handrails, add those supports, and those supports can look like anything you want them to be. And like I said, the nice part is now I can unpin them, move them, do whatever I need to do. But it's still a support, so if I did edit the path of this, make this longer, try 8 feet like we did the last one, finish it out. Cool. I lost my in support probably, or it's thinking this one's the in support, who knows? But now I can take this one, move it, and do what I need to do. So for me, a lot of my railing families are actually supports. So if I come over here and look at like even this glass one, right? This is one that I have a lot of clients use all the time. These are not baluster families. I can again tab select, grab this one, unpin it, and then start tweaking these and moving these where I need to be. Or in the case of the beginning and the end, I can swap it out to be a completely different different one. One of the two clips, right? I can swap it out to be a different panel, or excuse me, different support to get it to do that. So for me, understanding all of this and getting this set up, you can start doing crazy things, including spiral barbed wire, which I don't know, is he on here? Somebody actually asked this in like the Twitter world. And it's like, here you go, just use supports, just make a half spiral support. Again, I can tab select this one and unpin it. I could delete it if I wanted to, and just have this, start be gapping out. That's where the criminals cut the barbed wire to get through. That's all I got. So that would be it. Possibly look at using supports instead of balusters. I know Simon said he likes to use curtain walls. I'm not a big fan of using curtain walls for this. You still run into a lot of issues with curtain walls. I'd rather just make them all stairs. Like this entire thing here is all a handrail, including the concrete pile, the concrete footing. Everything is a handrail on that one. This one, this is all handrails. You can do quite a bit with handrails as long as you start looking into the supports into the handrail 1 and 2, including not that one, including this up here. This is also a support. So I just swapped out the in support to one of my rails, and swapped it out to be one that looks like a gate. And the reason why I like this is it still turns on and off with visibility graphics for railings. So hopefully, Chris, that answers your question.
Or at least makes you feel not alone in the struggle.
that's probably a better answer.
I guarantee you most of the people sitting here are like, oh yeah, I've fought that battle.
I remember the very first time I proposed on railings and it got accepted. I think it was a built conference, might have been Autodesk University. And I'm like, cool. And I started getting into railings going, oh my God, I don't know shit about railings. I'm going through all of this. Like, I thought I knew a lot about railings. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, and they're good when you have time to really dig in and get that knowledge. But when it's like the super fast, hurry, we need this railing, and then you get done and then they've changed it anyway. That's when it makes you super crazy.
Well, and that's like this railing up over here. For me, this is one of those ones where I always like to tell people, like, yeah, technically there would be a gap in here. If you actually look, or if I delete this, there's not a gap in there. I just have a new solid extrusion in there. So there's just one sweep going along here, because 90% of the time my clients throw this in an SD and then it gets VE'd out in DDs. And it's like, don't waste your time going too in depth on rails in SD, or, you know, wait till you get to that CD to fine tune the stairs, to fine tune the rails. Because yeah, when I look that same kind of scenario over here, yeah, this looks like shit. This is that same railing applied to stairs. It overlaps up here. It does this, but you know what? This is good enough for schematic design. I am completely okay with this. But if you look at the inside, now the inside I've tweaked. I technically have the gaps. You can see the gap in here. I technically have the gaps. I've modeled this exactly the way it would be. But this took some time. This I've done with railings and adaptive components, because it's just not worth it to do in railings. But this railing still technically has a support in here. So if I tab select, I might need to do it at the bottom. But if I tab select, there it is. If I tab select and get this support, I just turn the gasket material off. But the cool part about that is even though I had this one like over here with the gasket, I should have isolated this. With the gasket, I can still snap to that point for my adaptive components. So I put the gasket, I put the same thing in there. I just then have a checkbox that allows me to turn that off. So if I tab select to get that clip, you'll see there's a type property for there that has the gasket material on. I just turn it off. Then I host my adaptive components to that gasket. And I was dumbfounded that the adaptive component stayed and it didn't lose its host when the solid disappeared. I was so dumbfounded on that. So the cool part is, even if I leave that turned off, just like everything else, I can tab select to get this baluster. I can unpin it and then I can move it and all my handrail pieces will update. Well, the bottom one broke, but am I moving the whole rail? Shoot, I grabbed the whole rail, not just, don't move the whole rail, grab the clip. There we go. So you can see my live panel is now updating with this. So again, would I do that in SD? Hell no, that would be way too much time and effort for it to get VE'd up. Hence why I have the one on the outside. No, this is what it looks like. Good luck with Revit, have fun.
We actually started going with just a like handrail to throw in there, or just the horizontal, so that people don't get too hung up on what the railing is that early.
Yeah, I just wish it would do better in the transitions, and it does sometimes. Like, why did it do great on this side but not that side? It's like, oh, it's so frustrating. And it will never do good on the top or bottom. Like, okay, this, and you know, it's like whatever. But again, this is schematic design, gets the point across. And it's the same thing over here. This was a schematic design handrail that you start with, which gave me those glass sweeps, which in this case, the glass sweeps did okay. Did fairly decent on this. I was surprised. And then this side is okay. Now I got rid of that sweep and I just started replacing it with adaptive components. And again, pain in the ass, but it is still flexible by using the adaptive component family. And the other cool part, the other really odd part to me is adaptive components can also be railing families. It's one of the few family categories we have in adaptive components. We've got like no family categories for these, but if you actually come in here, one of the family types you can choose family category is railings. So it's like, whoa, I can do it as a railing. This is very, very cool. So it actually turns on and off just like the rest of the rails.
Simon's saying it makes you wonder why Autodesk didn't put effort to fixing the stair and railings. And I know they have effort, but it kind of just stopped.
They did change them in 2009. 2009 was when they gave us capability to do supports and top rails and handrails. That became really, really nice. I mean, yeah, they're still massively limiting, and you have to, if you're going to have a master's degree in Revit railings, just be able to understand any step of them. But they are better than they used to. Prior to 2009, yeah, they were horrible. You couldn't do anything with them.
And Jason has a good point. They can't make money if they're spending the money on fixing things. Also true. It's not a big, super exciting thing to show the stockholders when they say, look, we fixed railings, even though all the users are like throwing parties.
I laugh. This was a long time ago. I think it was 2012 when they upgraded the stairs, but they said, oh yeah, we're just going to the Revit ideas and we're going to start using those to do it. I'm like, okay, if we look at railings have a total of 18,000 votes. If you look at all the different topics on the Revit ideas forum, it is the highest rated thing to get fixed. They're like, yeah, but we're looking at them individually. I'm like, oh my God. I think that was their excuse of, we know they suck. We know it's a big project. We're just ignoring it for now. Yeah, 2012 did have, Michael asked, didn't 2012 have an upgrade to stairs? Yeah, basically all 2012 gave us was the multi-level stairs. And they allow the stairs to go back upon themselves, which they couldn't do historically, but the handrails can't. So having stairs wrap back around themselves when the handrails can't is kind of pointless. So sure, they updated that, but you didn't fix the part that gets hosted to it.
Yeah. Oh, and Michael's saying, didn't 2012 have a stair upgrade? Yeah. So we got like the multi-level stairs. They worked on that a little bit later, but then that was about it. By zooming in over there, does that mean you would like to answer this anonymous question on the best way to model a helix like the barbed wire?
Yeah, so I saw this, search on the Autodesk Knowledge Forum. I did post this family to the Autodesk Knowledge Forum. I'll see if I can find it when we're looking here. But yeah, so this was, somebody had asked, I don't know, is Tom on here? Tom had asked like in the Twitter sphere, and so I posted it up on the Autodesk Knowledge Forum that literally this is the support. So if I tab select, grab this, and I edit this family, this is just a sweep, right? So you'll see if I select this, it's 2 swept paths. So you can see our swept blend, excuse me. So it's just a blend here, and if I edit the path, it's actually really funny. Edit swept blend, the path is straight. I just have an offset for each circle. So here's the path. This circle's offset there. This one's here. This one's offset the exact opposite amount. If you look at it, you'll see that I have a profile offset. So I'm only offsetting the profile on one of each of those. When we look at that, right? So this is a support. And then when you actually look at that support, you take that support and add it to a handrail because, sorry, yes, handrail. The overall thing is a railing. Each individual component's a handrail. So if I grab probably this top one, that's the whole chain link tab. Did I bury it in there again? It could be buried in there, but we'll just go edit the whole thing and look at it. So then you have your top rail, your handrail 1 or your handrail 2. You'll see I've got one called spiral barbed wire. And basically all I'm doing is using a support and giving that support whatever spacing distance is twice of the offset in that support family. So that was 3 inches, I offset at 6. You could edit the family, make that a 4-inch offset, make this 8 inches, and it would give what you want. But that's all that I have inside of here. So that's the best way. It's all 100%. So hopefully that answers Anani Mouse's question as well.
Yes, let's hope so. Let's see. Well, we were just looking at those. Let's go to the next anonymous question that says, do you have a good way to array families that have to be adjustable for slope conditions? When I use face-based, the array will always move away from the insertion point. Any tips to lock that down?
I don't know if I understand this question. Slope condition. Oh, so you have an array family, you want it to be slopable. Um, and you need to get that to be locked down. Yeah. Just trying to think if I have a family that does that.
Yeah, it was making me think of a ladder or a ship's ladder or something, but I might be off too.
Yeah, that absolutely could be that. I was just, I don't think I have a family off the top of my head that has that in it, but it's not a big deal. We'll go do generic model ENU. Sweet, here we go. So whenever you're doing an array, personally, I would be nesting something into this array, right? So if I go to look at my families and what I have, I don't ever try to do an array within a family that doesn't have the thing I'm arraying nested. You can attempt to do it and build groups and then array the groups with it's never going to be a great idea to try to do that. So I always come in here and have some sort of thing that I'm going to array, right? So I have this frame. Cool, I'll use this one. This is what I do. So I will create, even if it's just like, there's probably one in here just called line, might not be in this one. Because like, even when I have to show, I have a lot of clients who use like conveyor belts, like at TSA security, or they got the little roller wheel conveyor thingies. I needed to array a line. I didn't array the whole roller wheel, just a line. I have a generic model family that literally is a line. And the reason for is if I parametrically want to control the length of that line, trying to do it within the family becomes a pain in the ass. So you'll see, I've got this one in here. We'll use this family. So literally it's just basically a panel rectangle type extrusion, right? It's got little X's in here. It's nothing crazy. This is set up to always vertical. Sometimes making it work plane based might work better for you, but it's not necessary. So if I go ahead and load this into my family one, and I place this, right? Depending on the array that I'm going to want to do for this is if I go into an elevation now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create two reference planes. I'm going to create a reference plane here. I'm going to create a reference plane here. I always name my reference plane. We'll say first. I don't need that to be a reference, and I'll call this one second. And I don't need that to be a reference either. So now when I go in and do a dimension, I can have this one as my first offset and this one as my second offset. So we'll call this, we'll add a parameter, oops, we'll select the dimension, add a parameter here, call it first off. And second off. So now those are parametric. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my floor plan view. I'm going to take this, I'm going to array it. Sure. I'm going to make sure I'm set to move to second because that's what I just said, first and second. I'm going to go ahead and put this over here. And then I'm going to take this array quant and give myself a quantity. We'll add a parameter here. Quantity, sure. Now that I've done that, and I always do my arrays first, it's now constraining each one of those elements. So I'm going to get in here and I'm going to pay attention to make sure I'm getting a reference plane. So I'll see in here, I'm getting that center front back reference plane with inside of that family. So I'm going to array that, lock it. I'm going to array this one, lock it. I think I forgot the lock on that one, and I don't think it was turned on. It was not. Lock it. And then I'll go into that front view and I will align this one to this, lock it, and this one to this and lock it. Right now, if I come into my second offset and say that's cool, but this one wants to be 3 feet, I can move that up and this is going to start going along for the ride. So not going to drift on me. I can get that array, get it set up for the offset. I've got the quantity offset. If I were to go change that quantity offset to be, 4 or something, it's going to move it. But again, I did say this was the second. So you might want this to be the last because you're like, ooh, here's my end point. Here's my start point. Those are the elevations I want it to be. So you absolutely could build that in, start getting there. And if you really, really wanted to, you could then start coming with formulas to define the slope or not the slope, whatever you wanted to be if you knew that's what you were looking for. But this is the basic concept behind it. So hopefully, Anani Mouse, that answers your question.
Yeah, I think Michael was thinking the same. He's guessing it's the third axis drift you get with nested arrays.
So as long as you constrain it, all of them on the X, Y, and Z, you shouldn't get that constraint there. The other thing too is if you just want to do it normally, you could also say it was work plane based. And then if you're trying to host this into like a project, you could say, hey, I want to go pick a plane, and you could pick the roof before you did it, or something else. Technically, you could also do this as a line-based family. Just quick note on line-based families, if you use line-based families, they do not work in groups. They will blow up a group. So if you use a lot of groups, do not use line-based families. But the nice part about a line-based family, so if you started the array with a line-based family, then you can pick anything for that to be the host. And if whatever that host is, it will automatically slope with that. So, but even if I was doing it flat on a line-based family, I would still align and lock this nested family to the reference plane and to the reference plane. Depending on if I did move to second or move to last, that's the one you lock. So multiple ways to do it, but if you're not thinking, if you're thinking, hey, I just manually want to be able to do this, this is what you could go through and do. Cool.
All right. Well, we only have one more question in there, so.
Well, we have 8 minutes left, so I think it's actually perfect timing because we have 8 minutes left. Last month we went I went over like 40 minutes.
That's
it was
fair.
terrible.
All right, then our last question that we've got is about doors. Well, I guess headers technically. Do you like putting headers in a door or opening family? And then followed up by how do you do headers typically?
I don't typically put headers in a door family because that's the job of the engineer to tell me what it is, and it's the job of the architect to model the doors. I have modeled in things like king studs in a door family, and the only reason I've done that is for contractors. So whenever there's a door, I just model a king stud, and there is an instance-based property for like floor to floor height, and that's there. So when the contractors start doing clash detection, they can understand that this door is going to probably have some sort of support going up to structure. Therefore, you need to not run duct work right over this. But for my structural engineers, I have created opening families that nests in columns, so they can have one trimmer, two trimmers, more wood residential type, multifamily type construction. But I've created an opening for a structural engineer where they can have, hey, does it got 1, 2, 3, 4 trimmers? Basically, there's a nested family that's arrayed. Same thing for king studs. How many king studs do they have inside of there? And then it's also got the header size. So they put the opening in to match the architect. Hey, this is a 3.0 by 8.0 opening. And then they can go in there and say, hey, I'm putting in, a 2x12 header, 3 trimmer studs, whatever. But again, that's all going to be based upon what the structural engineer says. So those family I've created for structural engineers or contractors. I've never added that stuff to an architect's door family. I don't think your guys' doors have headers in them, do they, Melissa? No. And a lot of times on commercial, there's no header above the door anyway. It's just a metal 2x4 turned sideways because there's no load coming down on that metal wall. So if there's no load, you don't really even have that many headers in there. So.
This is true. Well, that was really fast. Well done. All right, so Brian was asking if you have any recommendation for annotated text in a circle, like in engineer stamps.
Yeah, I draw a circle, I put a piece of text on that circle, I rotate it, I draw the next letter for the text, then I draw the next letter for the text. No, there's no way in Revit to do text on a curve. You are just hosed if that's what you're trying to do. I believe at one point in time, and I have a family that I can open that does it similarly, but I don't know if the text rotates in this family. Yeah, it does. So this would basically be all I can have for you. The one point in time, I have a client, they do a lot of courthouses, and every courthouse has a clock, so I created a clock. I actually created a Dynamo script to actually look at the time of the day for the view, and then the clock can be updated based on the time of day for the view, so your rendering time is set correctly.
Of course.
Well, that was one of my first fortes in Dynamo. This was a long time ago. But as you can see in here, if I do go look at this, this is fully parametric. I think this is done in the floor plan. No, this is done in elevation. I can't remember. So if I go look at the elevation of this, this is a nested family. No, it's just not nested. I lied. It's not nested. This is 3D model text, but you can dimension to the points of 3D model text. So I did give myself the capability to come in and where is this text going to be from the center? So I can change the size of the clock, the lettering going up. So if you really were trying to do something, you could probably do the same thing with generic annotation nested in, where you can then say, hey, what's letter 1, what's letter 2, what's letter 3, what's letter 4. But you would literally have to come in there with like angle spacing between the two. This was a clock, so I didn't have to parameterize that. Not as big of a deal. It's just align and lock it and call it a day. But yeah, so you could do it, but no, there's no way to say, hey, make this text go on an arc. Yeah, no, that shit doesn't happen. There's way more parameters than there should be for a family like this, just because I wanted the text all to be, parametric. But if you guys ever need a crazy ass clock family, I do have one. So nope, Ryan, got nothing for you.
I think what you're saying is you need to model your.
You could do the same thing like for an engineer stamp if you're trying to get, but literally you'd have to do every single letter. So you'd have to do letters going around. You could attempt to do an array, but an array is not going to really work because the arrays are very hard to parameterize. And I don't know how well that would work with the nested generic annotation family. It might work. I don't know. But if you're trying to like just change the angle of them, it would work great. If you're trying to change the angle and the distance out from the center, yeah, that's where arrays fail pretty bad.
You wouldn't necessarily have to worry about the distance from center if you just need to get it set up.
Yeah, if you're talking just an engineer stamp and you want to change the engineer's name occasionally, but you'd have to, and you wouldn't even be able to, you'd have to get rid of the array because each letter would have to be different. So you can't group that in because you can't have the groups be, so you'd have to literally, yeah, no, you're just screwed. You're just literally, you'd have to put a generic annotation in for each one and then turn the visibility off if you're going from a 4-character name person to a 12-character name person. Just find the person with the longest name and do that in there when you get into there.
Oh, look, and here's our idea station.
Yeah, and Rick's like, hey, wait, we've had ideas on this for a long time. Yeah, so no. Text on an arc and Revit, not really something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all the ones I've done, I've started with just a piece of text and then rotated it or did a polar array for the exact number of letters that I needed and then changed each one.
Yeah, but you have to get rid of the array once you do it, the grouping of the array, because you can't have each letter be different.
Yep. Yeah, so all of them are basically a one-off.
Oh, and I forgot Chris sent that email. Dang it, Chris, I was supposed to look at that this morning and I forgot. Chris pre-emailed me a question. Yeah, kerning. Yeah, Michael's like kerning on that. It's on a curve. The kerning's not too. That's why I said you'd have to put each letter in, parameterize it for each letter. Because if you're like putting an I in versus a W, you want the spacing to be different. So you literally have to say angle between letter 1 and 2, angle between letter 2 and 3, angle between letter 3 and 4, and no thanks. So trying to parameterize something like that is, I just don't even think it's worth it. Just do a visibility toggle, put one person's name, turn it off, have 100 visibility toggles for each person. So Chris had asked me a question, and I don't know. I'll try to pull it up and see if I can get the question in here. He did send one to me via email. So when I had it sitting there, and I was going to look at it this morning, and then this morning got away from me. So Chris's question sent to me via email was, I have 100 different types of window trim families in our library, and I need to be able to swap them based on design options. So I build them in as windows. They're face-based generic models. I need to be able to do some quantity takeoffs on them for certain types. I've nested in some line-based, shared families, etc. So far, so good. Now I would like to. Somebody started talking in my house, and I realized it was the robot vacuum telling me it's restarting its charge. I'm like, I'm alone in the house. Who is talking?
That thing is loud as hell.
Yes, it is. So I'd like these families to be visible in 3D in front and elevation. So one of the things on that, Rick, that I did say, so what Rick's saying is he's got a nested family. And when you look at a nested family, especially if they're face-based, and you go in here to the visibility graphics, the visibility graphics says plan, front, back, left, right. This is not of the object you're going to be hosting it into, it's of the view you are currently in. So you notice that this clock is a face-based family. It says face-based, right? So it's just like the generic model face-based family. However, I did not use the out-of-the-box template from Autodesk, because you'll see that if I go to my floor plan, my face-based object is vertical, right? And this is the part of the reason why I did this and for the MEP people out there, because generic annotation stuff only shows up in a plan view. But you're like, oh, I want to do an outlet symbol, but the outlet's here, but I need to nest that, so the symbol didn't work properly. So what I've created is a face-based vertical template that for your case, Rick, this might actually solve a lot of your problems. That if I'm coming in here, then when I put this element and nest it into something else, the left is truly the left, the right is truly the right, the front is the front, the back is the back, etc. So when you start going into this visibility graphics, it's going to look at what this family is set up to. And since you said things like window casing, you're going to want that to be vertical, but you want it to be face-based as well. So my only thought in what you said, and this doesn't help you with your line-based components unless you build them on a vertical face, would be to, sorry, I said Rick. No, it was Chris's question. Thank you, Rick. Would be to think about possibly converting some of that stuff using a vertical face-based template. That's all I got. That's the scenario. I didn't really get a chance to try to play through and work through looking at the families you had. So Chris, hopefully, kind of maybe will help you. Might not at all. I don't know. But it's an answer. I always say I have an answer for everything in Revit Radio.
Nice.
Might not be a good one, but it's an answer.
And did throw a question in about where to go if they wanted to watch Revit Radio again.
If you Google the Revit Geek on YouTube, I do have a YouTube channel. It's got about 6 Revit radios that I started recording. Well, I don't think I posted last month. I can't remember. But once this recording gets done, I'll try to remember to get last month.
You'll forget to upload this one.
Yeah, this does not go back to 2004 when when I started Revit Radio. I do not have all of them in there, which they'd probably be pointless anyway. But I did recently do them. I used to have the philosophy I didn't record these because A, they're never politically correct. But B, sometimes after Revit Radio, like 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh, that was a horrible answer. I should have said this. And I, used to just be like, I used to care about that. Now I just don't care if it's a horrible answer. It was off the top of my head. Who cares? It was off the top of my head.
I was gonna say, who wants more of this?
Oh,
obviously you do, because you married me. You married me, so obviously you do.
No, I'm just stuck with it now.
That is true. And I will put my YouTube chat up in the link before we go. I don't have enough followers to have like a dedicated YouTube channel. I'm not that cool. But I will try to get it up here. Here is my channel. Here you go. It is down in the chat, and I will try to add that to the YouTube comments if I think about it when I'm posting the recording.
I think you posted that just to us.
Oh, I did only post it to hosted panelists. God dang it. Let me try that again. There we go. That means the comment, that means the reply I did to somebody else earlier only went to, yeah, I also posted the link to the Autodesk. I will post this to everyone since I didn't earlier either. So there we go.
I didn't even notice that.
Okay, this is really weird. My other laptop's making noise. Got the vacuum on that side of the house making noise, the other laptop making noise. I don't know what's going on here. Well, that's okay. We're just past the top of the hour. That means we finished, you killed another billable hour listening to me talk about nothing. As always, thanks for Melissa for joining. It's always nice to see her, and Desiree for coming in halfway through. She actually is like she has billable work she has to do. She can't just, be like me and slack off all the time. So thanks everyone for being here, and we hope to see you guys next month.
Bye.
Bye.